Welcome. So, I want to talk, not surprisingly, about unexplained, unresolved pain because that's what I see all the time with people. I see these people who've been to all these other doctors and they're continuing to have pain and they're getting their NSAIDs and their tramadol or their Tramadex, whatever you want to call it, depending on what country you're in. They're getting their injections or their procedures and they're still suffering. Okay, so those meds, those procedures work for some people, but not everybody. And some people don't get better and they continue to suffer. Maybe they even have complications of the medications or complications of the procedures. And for some people, it's not just that, like, okay, I've got pain and it keeps going. For some people, it's escalating, it's getting worse. They're getting less and less able to function. Sometimes they'll develop other problems. And maybe this is relevant for you. Like, okay, it started with pain after that mild injury, but then started to get brain fog or maybe nausea or constipation or diarrhea or irritable bowel type stuff. Maybe you develop depression or anxiety. There's a snowball that can happen. And that's why I've been talking lately, and I talk all the time about the 6 things that can prevent healing, can worsen pain, and can lead you towards disability if you're not careful. So I encourage you to check those lectures out. They're available. There's various posts connecting to them. If you want to get the full-on sort of videos of those, shoot me a PM and let me know, and I'll send you a link. In the meantime, today I want to kind of sum it up and make it clinical so you get a feel for it and give you the abbreviated version. This is the Cliff Notes. So if you don't want to watch those videos, here's what you got to know, okay? So I'm going to talk about it in the context of Roberta, who's one of my patients. And she came to me and she described, I feel like my body is just tight and restricted and it's harder and harder to move and it's like cramping and spasmodic. And she had had this moderate car accident where she had kind of a neck strain injury and she wasn't too bad at the time when it happened. She went to the emergency room just because the EMTs told her to, and they checked her out and everything was okay. They sent her home, and it wasn't until a couple of days later that she started to get more pain in her neck, and then it went to her shoulder and to her arm, down to her hand. Then a little while later, it started affecting her back, and actually her legs started to get involved. Before she knew it, she had pain all over her body. And she went to doctor after doctor. She went all these procedures and diagnoses and MRIs and EMGs, and it was really hard and painful, and like she wasn't getting any better. And she was getting various drugs. People were throwing around diagnoses like fibromyalgia. She had no idea what was going on. And it's actually a pretty classic story. I've probably heard that similar story maybe 100 or more times in my career. And it could be just like that, commonly with a car accident, strain injury. But it happens with other things. Somebody was talking with me online yesterday on Facebook, describing falling and having a pelvic fracture and then developing pain going down her leg. And they weren't sure if it was sciatica or a compressed nerve in her back. And again, lots of tests and workup with nothing revealing, lots of therapies with nothing helping. So like, what's going on? Why are all these people suffering? I could give you 100 cases like that of different parts of the body. Someone who had fractures in the thoracic spine, somebody who had sort of complications after shoulder surgery, that pain that starts and spreads, that pain that feels tighter and tighter. Roberta said she like had seen a video of some big fish, or maybe it was a turtle caught in like a fishing net, and it was struggling and struggling, and like it was getting tighter around, and that poor creature like couldn't get out and was getting exhausted. She said that's what she's feeling like. So what's up with that? Why does that happen? There's a constellation of things. There's a lot of reasons, and my approach has been to be a little bit less concerned about my orthopedic thinking that I was taught at Harvard Medical School, and to step back into thinking about, okay, what's the underlying physiology of pain? What makes pain worse? What's the underlying physiology and function of your muscles and connective tissues? And what has them dysfunctional? These are things I learned from osteopaths, things that I learned from studying mind-body medicine and the underlying science of pain and neuromusculoskeletal medicine. And so in those 6 things that worsen pain videos, 3 of the things that I talked about were very relevant in Roberta's case. One is autonomic imbalance. And briefly speaking, you've got an autonomic nervous system, which is your fight, flight, freeze response and your rest and digest response, your stress response, your relaxation response. And what frequently happens after an injury is that stress response gets overactivated. It creates kind of a hypervigilance. It turns on the reflexes. It can sensitize the pain processing of the body. It can make the mind more stressed. It can create insomnia. It can do a lot of different things to all of your body systems because it touches every cell in your body. So autonomic imbalance can really throw things out of balance. So that's one thing. And the next thing is what you could call neuromuscular dysfunction or nerve muscle dysfunction. And like I explained in the video on that, you've got this exquisite system that is just controlling all of the function of your nerves and muscles at every level of your body, every joint. It's so complex, it's so rich, it's so beautiful when it works and when it heals. But what happens is when there's an injury, you have protective responses. And the simplest way to explain this is like imagine you touch a hot stove, and before you even think about it, you pull your hand back. What is that? It's a protective reflex. And those protective reflexes exist at every joint, every limb throughout your body. There's different ways your body pulls in this and that direction to protect itself from harm. The problem, though, is that if there's an injury and your system's susceptible and there's ongoing pain in that area, you can get protective reflexes that get stuck. All of the control system can get out of whack, and you can get tightening down of your neuromuscular patterns. You can get guarding. I saw someone just this past week who had described, actually it was on Sunday, who had carpal tunnel-like pain, but basically she's like, but I've got this knot up at my arm, right up here, and my whole arm hurts. Like, how could it be carpal tunnel? And she's right. Carpal tunnel creates pain in the median nerve distribution, right there. Why does it hurt her neck? It's a protective response of that. And when that happens over time, it gets worse. And so if you've got autonomic imbalance and your system is set up for protection because of an injury, because of a trauma, because of underlying anxiety, because of previous adverse events in your life or your childhood, or a number of different things that can bias your system towards a protective stress response, and then you add to it neuromuscular guarding responses, those are synergistic. It's a snowball because the autonomic imbalance makes the reflex tighter. And the reflex and the pain feeds into the autonomic imbalance. Okay, so that's one part of it. The third part is the other issue in the 6 issues, the 6 things that worsen pain, etc. And that's soft tissue dysfunction. Because you've got a myofascial system. You've got connective tissue that connects everything in your body, bones to skin, toes to nose. Everything is connected in a web of connective tissue. That connective tissue is contractile. It has pain fibers in it. It's the stuff that wraps around your muscles and attaches them to the bones. It's the stuff that holds your organs together and lets things slide and move. It's this incredibly complex system. And it's prone to restriction in response to injury. It's prone to tightening down in response to pain, especially if you have inflammation or systemic inflammation. There's a variety of things that can make your connective tissue system more reactive, and that can create this kind of tightening, like the body can't move as easily as it should be. Sometimes that's just in one region of the body, like a limb. Sometimes it's system-wide. I see a lot of people who have widespread pain and fibromyalgia who, besides having the underlying central sensitization, that's sort of the medically diagnosed part of fibromyalgia, there's also this aspect of neuromuscular protection and autonomic imbalance and tightening the connective tissue system. So like, what do you do about that? Because it's clearly not about drugs and procedures. And my perception is, and my perspective is that it's about lifestyle and things you can do for yourself and other things people can do for you. I talk about this in a lot of detail in those videos, but basically the right kind of hands-on therapy to actually release your neuromuscular patterns and also release your connective tissue patterns, as well as mind-body therapy to shift that autonomic imbalance. And that can be as simple as just doing breathing techniques to help your body-mind relax. And it can go deeper to actually shift deeper patterns of emotional gardening and protection that can happen from trauma, whether it was adult trauma or early life trauma. And then there's things you do for yourself. There's movement arts. And that's part of why I developed this program called Movement Towards Health that maybe you've heard of. It's a systematic way of teaching you how to reverse really mainly these three things, these three aspects of autonomic dysfunction and neuromuscular dysfunction and myofascial dysfunction through teaching you movement arts that are really based on Tai Chi with modifications, as well as meditation practices that calm that overactive stress response. And we also really get into the anatomy, and I learned this from osteopathy, that really your consciousness influences your anatomy. And just by bringing awareness to your body, you can release and relax it. You can turn off some of those automatic neuromuscular patterns and reflex patterns. You can turn off those sympathetic hyperactive segments of your spinal cord that are contributing to that pain. And so we do that in a monthly membership where we get online, we meet once a week, we learn these really fun techniques that are like smooth flowing dance moves. We also do meditations, we study anatomy, and we do a lot of Q&A where I just share stuff that I know from over 20 years of seeing literally tens of thousands of patients with various kinds of chronic pain and chronic injury. So you might find that interesting to think about joining us, especially if you're dealing with persistent pain. And I just want to show you a little bit, right? Like this is just a little taste of the kind of stuff we learn, right? I'm going to adjust this camera. Hang on one second. Bring it down so you can see me a bit better. Okay, that's cool. Great. So really simple stuff, simple stuff like breathing in and breathing out. And unifying your breathing and your motion. Because when you unify your breathing and your motion, you start to release some of that neuromuscular guarding. We're not talking about like no pain, working, gain, working hard. We're talking about very soft, smooth motions that you do with a relaxed mind, with steady breathing. We intentionally cultivate joy and bring that into the body, bringing gratitude into the body. So simple stuff that opens your chest and your ribs and your shoulders, and then releases and opens the posterior stuff in your back. And simple, repeated breathing in, breathing out, opening, closing, softening and releasing the connective tissues. We do these warm-ups that are like, okay, let's get all the muscles, all the tissues of your joints moving in your hand and your wrist and your elbow and your shoulder. And then we do certain exercises that are spiraling the body, because the fascia, the connective tissue, is in spiral patterns. And when you learn to move in a really soft, fluid way with your breathing, with a relaxed mind, you start to release the connective tissue and the fascia. Then there's deeper core movements that are just very subtle, about just like settling down into an imaginary pool of warm water and feeling a spring bubbling up, letting your body rise up on that spring. And that's introducing relaxation, and it's actually waking up the energetics of your body. Your body has an energy system. We've got growing scientific evidence that's like not in the mainstream journals because it's too weird for most doctors to think about, but we've got these things that are being measured. We've got the fact that in every human society, until the Western society that we're in, there was a concept of an energy system that's involved in regulating your biological functions and helping your body have a sense of vitality. That's part of what gets restricted when your body gets like in that net of connective tissue and neuromuscular and autonomic restriction. So what we're doing in Movement Towards Health is that it's about your health. It's not about your illness. It's about reawakening the health in your body and your mind and reteaching your system to function effectively. And it's soft, and it's sweet, and it's fun, and it gets your body moving. And most people describe having a lot more energy after doing it. And what else is there to say? Think about it. Check it out. Have a look online. There's various links to it. You can go to www.mthtribe.com and have a look and see if it makes sense to you. Send me a PM, ask me any questions you got about it. I'm here to serve. I'm doing this because I've spent over 20 years working with people with difficult to treat pain syndromes, and I've learned these unbelievably transformative healing techniques firsthand over the past 30 years, and they work. People come to me with stuff where they've been to a lot of different doctors and they get nowhere. And then we bring this integrative approach, and then suddenly something shifts and moves, and oh my gosh, I've got more energy. Oh my gosh, I've got less pain. Oh my gosh, I'm building strength in my legs again. I was getting weak and disabled and losing my balance, and now I've got strength. One of my students recently told me about how she's able to go shopping again. She loves shopping. She wasn't able to do it because she was so weak and tired and didn't trust herself. But there we are, and she's coming once a week. We're doing these movements. We're doing these one leg pose, right? Floating up like a bird. And it takes time, it takes practice, but she's building her strength again. And it's a really good contradiction to the usual kind of gym physical therapy thing, especially if you've got chronic pain, fibromyalgia, and if those things just wipe you out. This is just a simpler, softer way that helps you build strength from the inside out. So check it out. Thanks for watching.